Okay, this will be block 2, and there's not near as much video to watch in this as there was in the last one in terms of overview. There's more technical video to watch, but less video of me chatting. There's only a few slides here. In this block, what we're going to talk about is support technology, which is primarily networking pieces and some other aspects of the configuration for distributed processing that you may or may not be familiar with from some of your other studies in networking or cybercrime or some of the other parts of your training. So let's jump right in. Some considerations for distributed. Again, the network needs to be air-gapped, and by air-gapped what we mean is there's no connection to an outside network from the network in which we're doing the ring configuration. In other words, there's a gap between whatever switch we're using and the school or company or or departmental networks. This is a private network. The only thing plugged into this switch are the components actively involved in the distributed processing piece. No internet connection, no other LANs, nothing like that. So that's a physical configuration item, and we'll do that in the laboratory portion of the course. The firewall in each machine needs to be turned off. We could tune it. It would be quite aggravating to do so and not worth it. Once we're air-gapped, we don't need the firewall. We're the only ones working on our network. We're optimizing purely for speed. It's not a permanent configuration. We're going to get the firewall off. IP addresses, everything's going to need to be in the same subnet. If you don't know what a subnet is, you're going to need to take net or CTI 120, net 125, net 126 courses along that line to describe what a subnet is. I'd recommend a private IP range, and primarily because then they're not routable, or at least not technically routable. I typically do something like 192.168.1.1 for the header, 1.2 for Oracle, 1.3 for image server, 1.4 for the one worker, 1.5, 1.6 for the other worker, so forth and so on. And I usually put a little name card above each machine describing what the machine is, FTK header, and I put the IP address on it, 192.168.1.1. That way when I'm doing path names or trying to do troubleshooting later, I know which machine is which. If you don't know how to set an IP address, we have a little video on it. Same as the firewall above, by the way. If you don't know how to turn the firewall off, we have a little video on turning the firewall off. And same for the IP address that you'll need to watch before class, please. And we're going to need to set all those IP addresses and make sure they're set all to the same subnet mask, which again I'd recommend a /24 or 255.255.255.0. You will not need a gateway. In fact, do not put a gateway on it, and don't put a DNS server on there. You won't have one, so don't put one in. Just leave that alone. And that'll be all we need to do really with the IP address. I would recommend you check connectivity before you proceed. After setting the IP address, make sure you can ping some other stations and they can ping you, so we already know that we have connectivity. In terms of users, we're going to have to create some user accounts on each machine. Primarily, we really only have to create one user account. On the Oracle machine, we may have to create a second user account depending on how we do things, but primarily we only have to create one user account. That account needs to exist on every machine, and it needs to exist exactly like if you make the account FTK password 123 on the header. For the local user account, that local user account needs to be the same on the Oracle machine and on every other machine. The password is case sensitive. The username typically is not case sensitive. Regardless, I would try to make everything identical, uniform. That's what a mirrored local user account means. That means it's the same account on every machine. That way, when certain things are happening, like we're passing data back and forth through network shares, the credentials don't get in our way, the username and password. That's what I mean by credentials. They won't get in the way and mess us up if we have that stuff identical on each machine. In a true big network environment, you don't have to do that because you have domain accounts, and the account is looked up in the Active Directory database server. But we don't want a domain environment for distributed processing. That's way overly complex and provides way too much overhead for what we're trying to do. We're trying to build for speed, so we're going to use mirrored local user accounts, which mean it's the exact same account on each machine. And not only does that account need to be created, for instance, you can call it whatever you want, but call it FTK, and the password is 123 or whatever. That account needs to exist on every machine, and it needs to be an administrator account. And we have a video on creating the account and setting the account to the administration type if you need that. In fact, whether you need it or not, please go ahead and watch it. So when you get to class or get to the lab, we have that taken care of, and we don't have to go over that again. We generally won't have the time for it. We're also going to create shares, and we're going to create very open share permissions. We're going to give everyone full control on the share, and the NTFS permissions also are going to be set to full control. Now, every time when you create a shared folder in an NTFS Windows 7 environment, there are two types of permissions. There's share permission, there's NTFS permission. They interact, and there are properties in how they interact. If you set them both to full control for the purposes of our class, distributed processing, permissions won't come into play. It doesn't matter. But you really should know as a networking person or as a cybercrime person how those permissions work. And we have courses in the program that will go through that in somewhat detail. NOS 130, NOS 230, NOS 231. Those courses will discuss the share and NTFS permission interaction arrangement. Way beyond the scope of this course. This is a pretty short course. It's way beyond our scope to get into that level of detail here. Just be content to know that if we set them both to full control, the permissions will not be an issue. Some other stuff we should be aware of. We need to set our antivirus suites. They should be off. It wouldn't even hurt to have them uninstalled, but go ahead and make sure they're off. If you're trying to perform antivirus on the Oracle server, for instance, boy, it's really going to slow it down. So go ahead and get rid of that. Turn it off. If you're on an air-gapped network, that's not a problem. Indexing, we need to turn indexing off, drive indexing in Windows 7. That can really slow down the networking as well as we're moving files around a whole lot. The OS is trying to index those files. It can be really, really slow. So go ahead and get that turned off, and we have some videos to help you with that. That's really all we have for this block in terms of the support technologies. Each of these items could be dealt with in tremendous detail, but those are the subjects more properly of other courses in the program. Distributed processing is really neat in that it brings together lots of pieces of different courses together to perform the function that it's required to do. So it's kind of a neat little training course, but we could easily get beyond our scope if we weren't careful. So let's go ahead and call this one complete. Please make sure you watch all the demonstration videos before you come to class, so you will know what you need to do when we get into the lab environment in terms of configuring all the different devices. Okay, we'll see you in the lab.